Hello, everyone. I'm Michel Nevedo, and welcome to Friday 420. Today, I'll be talking about autoflowering cannabis with Dwight Diotte, a cannabis geneticist and researcher. For those who don't know, autoflowers are a type of cannabis that start flowering no matter how much light they receive. Normally, cannabis plants require shorter days and longer nights to start flowering, but not so for autoflowers. And the plant responsible for the autoflowering trait is Cannabis ruderalis, one of the three main subspecies of cannabis alongside Cannabis sativa and Cannabis indica. Dwight has been breeding Ruderalis plants for the last 40 years. Dwight, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Michelle, and thanks for having me on and allowing me to talk about this.
Excited to talk about it, man. So let's jump right in. Can you tell us where Ruderalis originally came from and how it differs from its cousins sativa and indica?
Well, I'll say first, you had mentioned you had introduced me as a geneticist. I'm not a university-trained geneticist. I'm a genetics advisor, so I might as well get that. Gotcha. So nobody jumps up and down too high, you know. But Ruderalis, it's wild. It could be. I mean, some think that the cultivated strains spread north from them, but others think that the cultivated strains spread south and originated from them, which I'm more on that in that camp, you know. And they range right from Eastern Europe right to Siberia, right to Mongolia, Siberia. They go through Kazakhstan, the Ural Mountains, all the way through. There's slightly different types of all these. I've grown 3 different varieties of them so far and been growing them on and off for 40 years. Now, the first ones, of course, were the ones in that iconic picture that everybody sees of Neville sitting on his knee looking at the plant on the side of the road. He was on his way to Hungary. He was on his way to Turkey to find Turkish hash plant seeds at the time. He had just started the seed bank not long before, and this was his first excursion to out of the country to try and find some genetics. So he was on his way to Turkey because Turkish was his favorite hash, and everybody who smoked hash at that time, Moroccans and Turkish and these various things, Lebanese, the Turkish was the top, you know, for the 70s and the 80s. It was like it's more refined, very fine resin heads. So he wanted to find some Turkish plants. So on his way to Turkey, he decided he brought this guy with him who also took the pictures, the famous pictures of Neville with when he went to Afghanistan and picked up the Mazar-e-Sharif seeds. It was the same fellow who had been a Vietnam photographer during the Vietnam War. He brought him with him. So he's the one who took these pictures, and he was a real photographer, you know, which is why the pictures were taken so well. So he was driving along the highway, all of a sudden sees these plants on the side of the road, these little Christmas trees, and realizes this is some kind of this is some kind of wild hemp, obviously, you know. So car comes to a screeching halt, and they get out, and the first ones we see was that little one that's in the picture there. And so he took pictures of that from all different angles, and so what he had figured is he had found some kind of very fast, because this is July, a very fast flowering hemp variety, simple as that. So he took some branches off of that. They drove around the back roads there for a couple of hours. I still have somewhere in my pictures, more pictures of all the different types that they found, you know. And so he harvested seeds from various phenotypes that they found in the back roads, and dried some of the weed from a couple of the buds from that particular plant, and a couple of others speed dried them on the heater in the car for a couple of hours while sitting in a hotel parking lot and driving around, so on and so on. Just, he wanted to see if there was something to it, you know, and to see what it was, get a taste. And so you can imagine speed dried Ruderalis from the side of the road on a car.
On the car heater, yeah.
Yeah, it's real fine, you know, but he smoked it, and he said suddenly it felt like there was a screen dropped over his eyes, and he was looking at things different, so he knew there was something in it. Didn't know what. It wasn't high. There had to be some kind of cannabinoids in it. So I guess they debated for quite a while. And then Neville decided that was it. I'm going to turn around with these and go back to Holland. He figured that's what he was, you know, that's
what he was destined to.
This is what he was destined to find. And to me, like, this was the beginning of the seed bank. And right after this, like, he had just started, he had, you know, this was the beginning. And if he hadn't found that little plant on the side of the road, who knows what would have happened? You know what I mean? He was on his
Yeah.
way to Eastern Turkey, and these are not the safest places to be going around looking for seeds or anything. You get caught even with a little bit of hash in those days, and you're in deep. You know, so who
Yeah.
knows? I've always had this feeling that little plant, and when you see something like a picture like that becomes kind of iconic, you know, that everybody that in the cannabis world has seen that picture, and it stirs something in people, and that's usually for a reason. It was there for a reason, and I think the reason was to stop him from keeping on going, just because maybe he might have gotten in trouble of some kind, and the seed bank had to open because it was so important. And on a spiritual level, when something like that happens, when you're on a mission and you have to turn around halfway or something, there's very often a reason for it. Your spirit is protecting you, something's protecting you, you know.
Yeah.
So he turns around. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say it literally stopped him in his tracks.
And a screeching halt.
For those who don't know about the photo that we're talking about, there's an iconic photograph of Neville Schoenmakers on the side of the road next to this short cannabis plant. And this was one of the first photos that we have in modern times of somebody kind of hanging out next to a Ruderalis plant and discovering that these are different plants than what we had been working with previously. So it's almost impossible to talk about Ruderalis and Autoflowers without talking about Neville Schoenmakers, who was your friend, and Neville passed away in 2019. But he was really one of the first to breed with Ruderalis and cross them with modern varieties.
He was the first. He was the first.
I was wondering, can you tell me how you met Neville, though?
There's a picture I've seen lately from 1972 or 74 or something of a researcher of some kind in Afghanistan with a picture of an autoflower Afghan plant. And that's the first, as far as I can tell, real documented, like there's documented of Ruderalis in general, but the real autoflower trait that goes through, you know, Asia. There's some that flower 18 hours, some that flower 17, 16, 15. So these are autoflower traits as well. But the autoflower that flowers under 24 hours or any light, then that's these types that go from Eastern Europe. And of course, in some places, people ask why they didn't spread further. They did. They used to be farther into Europe and even into Northern Europe, but they've been eradicated. When they see these on the side of the road in some countries, they cut them down. Simple as that, just like they've done often in the States. As far as how I met Neville, I was living in Oregon in 82, 83. And at that time, they had outlawed kind of paraphernalia and all that in British Columbia. And so you couldn't buy bongs or pipes in most places. Even we're having a hard time getting rolling paper. You had to get to the gas station, buy the thick export rolling paper, all this kind of, it was complete madness. They were, you know, this war on drugs. So I came back when I was in Oregon. All of a sudden, I'd met this guy run a little head shop, and he had a couple of boxes, a few hundred copies of old High Times that he just hadn't sold over the years. So I bought them from him, and for a buck each or something like that, and brought them back to Canada, smuggled them back to Canada, boxes of illegal reading material, High Times, right? So I brought them back to Canada, and I started in Vancouver. I was coming back to change cars, and I started in Vancouver. And I knew a couple of people with a head shop there, and one in Chilliwack, and all the way up to Kamloops. And so I dropped these copies of these things. I put them in dentist's office. I put these things everywhere over Southern BC. Yeah. So then I brought them to a guy. The guy's name was Doug. Everybody called him Doug the Slug. He had a little head shop in Kamloops in BC, and these people were keeping their head shops open even though they weren't allowed to sell anything because they were just so pissed off about the situation, you know. So he had like pictures of weed in there and a couple of other things, and so I gave him a whole stack of High Times, and I said, "Here, you know," and it was because we were talking for a while, and then I left, and I went back to another part of Canada. And so on, and no, I went back to the States. That's right. So then I came back to BC and came back to another part of Canada. Went back to the States. So a couple of years later, I walk in this shop and to see Doug. I was back in that town in Kamloops, and I thought, so when I walk in, he hands me a brand new High Times. And he goes, "Here you go." And he said the embargo is broken. I mean, we used all these ones that I had given him to make this new subscriptions, to order lights. He had all kinds of stuff being sold in there, and bongs, which he had ordered from these old High Times. And he said, "So thanks for bringing them," and blah, blah. And we talked, and he gave me High Times. So I go home, and I open the High Times, looking through, and there's Neville's ad. So that was it. I had kind of set it up for myself to get it as soon as it came up. 2 years before. So I see Neville's ad. I ordered a catalog right away. First, it was just that little ad with $1 each, and instead I'd ordered 5 seeds in a catalog or something, and it came pretty quick. So then I made a real order, which was a couple of packs, mainly Cash Rock, which was one of my favorites still. If I wish I could still get it, was cashmere crossed with Moroccan, and it was the only thing that I'd ever seen afterwards that would really fully finish without Ruderalis in it in Canada. You know, so I really liked that variety. So I had no proper paper in the house, so I wrote the order on a piece of birch bark. I went outside, I took a piece of birch bark off a tree, and somehow I think that struck a chord with Neville, because when the seeds arrived, he asked me to give him a call.
That's awesome. Did you say they were $1 each?
Look at his first ad. They were $1 and $2 each. You know, and sales on bulk. I mean, better prices on bulk.
Yeah.
So wow. You know, people said he was in it for the money. You know, this, I mean, $1, $2 for Thai seeds, Jamaican seeds, real thing. He you know, in Holland, the coffee shops were regularly importing weed. Most of the weed they were smoking was import. Only in 1984, 85 was all of a sudden starting the homegrown weeds and the green buds to start appearing in the shops. There was mostly hash and import weed. You know?
Well, so you called him up. You must have had a good conversation, because
just talked and talked, right? You know, and at that time it was expensive to talk on a side of the road phone with quarters too. So because that's all I was living in the bush. I had no phone in the bush. So anyway, we talked, and I called a couple of times, and he invited me over right away. He said, "Come on over, come and see me," and this and that. And this was like January, February '85, right after Christmas, and so by April I was there. Huh. So that was it. I arrived in April. He come and picked us up at the airport, and we went down and visited a friend of his in Tilburg, who was running a coffee shop there, who I later ended up working there a few years later, and working with this guy. And then I moved into a hotel down the street from his place. He wasn't living in the castle yet. He was still living in a little town called Milligan on the Rhine, right on the German border, and in one of these row houses. And so I moved a couple 100 yards down the road in a hotel for 5 weeks, and then we spent every day together driving around and talking and smoking and so on. So the first day I go to his house, when I walk in, on the shelf, he had like a cabinet there with a bunch of trays of seeds starting of various types, because it was spring and he was getting things going. He had a little garden in his backyard and was looking for a place to really get the seed bank going, you know. So I was looking at the seeds, saying, what's this? And he said, oh, these are plants I found on the side of the road in Hungary, very fast flowering. We're going to cross this into the new variety. It'll be great for Canada, and blah. And we'll look at it. But he was having a hard time getting them going. He'd been starting for a couple of weeks, and they weren't starting. So because they were hard as a rock, these tiny little black seeds. And anyway, so I helped him get those going. We took them out and I cracked them with thumbnail, these tiny little seeds, and we even put some in the gravel and walked on them, and then took the gravel and put those out, because we were laughing and talking. As guys do, you figure out how to get these things going, because he had found a lot of them along trails and so forth. So he figured people with horses, and just, this is what would crack these hard seeds. And you can tell, of course, it's in them not to all come up every year. Once it's an established population, they hold some back till the year later, survival of the species, and they come up. Different ones will come up during different conditions, So anyway, so we got some going and got them started, and I left 5 weeks later, started some other stuff too that I had brought, some Cambodian and some Purple Kush from 1983. That was in BC, the first Purple Kush I had ever seen. And he was getting some ties, and he had his Durban poison was a very good one that he had been growing right in his backyard there. So through a series of strange circumstances, I ended up being able to help him get the down payment together for what was going to be the castle. And we drove around southern Holland, his area, looking at farms and warehouses and various things to see where the place would be open, and didn't quite find the right spot. So I came back, and all of a sudden, a couple of months later, when I was talking to him on the phone, he said he had found the perfect place. It was an old brewery right on the dike close to Nijmegen, and that was going to be the spot, and that was it. So I'll go ahead. You were going to say something?
No. I'm listening.
So I went back a few months later in the fall then, and by then all the crops were going, the greenhouses were set up, there was grow rooms in the basement. He had been growing the Ruderalis all summer as well, and crossed it already into one of the long hazes, and had already crossed it into the skunk a couple of times. He wasn't wasting no time with this. You know, they flowered quick. They were dropping pollen. That's when he suddenly realized that this is an autoflower. He brings this back to Holland, puts it outside, even at 52 degrees latitude. Outside, it's flowering right away on the fifth or seventh node. He's got them inside under 18 hours of flowering, so he puts them inside under 24 hours. They're flowering, and that's it. This is an autoflower, and this is the first recognition of an autoflower cannabis plant that I know of by a person collecting it, recognizing it, grow while they're growing it, and then starting to use it for breeding. So no matter how, and at the same time, that spring, I brought a bunch back. He gave me about 100, 150 of them, and I brought them back to Canada and was growing them as well outside. So I grew them behind my house, all the same. I grew them inside. I grew them outside. I grew them in a greenhouse over the years. I grew them under 24 hours light, 22 hours light, 20 hours light, 18 hours. You know, every crop I was doing of anything that I was putting a couple of them in, just not so much for crossing, for just growing them as they were.
So, the Ruderalis or the
pure Ruderalis right from those seeds. Yep. And people used to say later that it was probably crossed, one of these Ruderalis autoflowers from further east, crossed with industrial hemp from Hungary. But as I thought about it more and more, I don't believe that. I believe this is because I've grown other Ruderalises since, of these autoflowers from Siberia, from Kazakhstan, and they all have exactly the same morphology, same taxonomy. You can see it the way the roots are, the way the leaves are, everything about them. It's the same plant. You can tell, just slightly adapted. Who brought it to the West? I mean, it just came with, who knows? Could have been Genghis Khan. I mean, it comes all the way from Mongolia. It comes with the birds and the animals. And anyway, so that was it. This was Ruderalis. There was no doubt about auto-flowering Ruderalis. There was no doubt about it. I grew about 150 of them, at least, plus inbred them. I grew them for years on and off. Then I ended up living in Holland a few years later, having to leave Canada and live there for years. I grew them in my garden there. And when I got back to Canada years later, I got them again. I got some from Kazakhstan and I got some from Siberia, and I'm still growing them. And I still have a patch that in a certain spot that I've been going wild now for 7 years. And I study these plants. I love these plants. I look at them they give me joy just to look at them. And you know, you can read everything you want, but there's nothing you learn better by than just standing there looking at the plant. That's how you learn. And not only from observation, but the plants will speak to you. They'll just, in your mind, suddenly you get revelations about plants, and that's them speaking to you. It's not just from yourself observing them, and they're very special plants. And I kept them going pure. I don't cross them as far as making autoflowers. I can do that anytime. I know exactly how to do it. And I just like them pure as they are, and feel that in the future, it's going to prove to be very, very important medicine, these wild Ruderalises, that as they are, because you take a few leaves of those and just throw it in a stew or something, you feel good for hours. I used it to quit smoking tobacco, and so did my wife. After many decades of smoking, we decided you're going to smoke Ruderalis instead, this autoflowering, and it worked. After 1 week, my cravings went away. It took hers a bit longer. She had smoked longer than I had, and it's a magical plant. There's something about it. So that's it. Now, there's been people talking lately saying, oh, it's not real autoflower. I've been seeing all these stories on the internet of people who didn't see it, who didn't grow it, who don't know what they're talking about, who have other agendas. And this is one of the reasons I'm doing this, because I want this to be set down. It was real. Neville was not lying about all this. Who would? Who would say, I found a hemp plant on the side of the road and it autoflowers? I mean, where would that even come into somebody's mind if it wasn't true?
Yeah, not to mention there's really good evidence, which is a beautiful photo of him sitting next to the plant
in the middle of July with all the plants and grass is all green. This is not the fall. This is the, you know.
Dwight, I wanted to ask about the growth habit. So I've seen photos of your patch that you have, and they grow. They kind of come up like kind of ground cover at first, like you can walk on them and stuff. And right,
that's one of the most amazing things about them is how cold it is when they come up. Like, I don't know how much cold they could handle at the end, because they all finish before you even get to the end of summer, really actually finish, whether they're pollinated or not. But they come up, I've had it on Celsius, 10 to 15 below zero, and they're still sitting there under the snow. They bend themselves over like this, and they look like frozen. They look like they're frozen, that dark green leaf that looks frozen, All of a sudden the next day, if there's even a little bit of thawing, then they stand back up again, they go down, they stand up, and nearly always since I put them out there, they come up almost exactly on 420, believe it or not. Yeah, it doesn't matter how much snow there is, if it's how cold it is, within 1 or 2 days of that on either side, that's when they come up. So to me, that's the trait that's most amazing about them. Besides, there's a whole bunch of traits, but that is a trait which you could have plants, you could grow plants that you sow in the fall and harvest in the spring. You see, you don't have to wait till you sow this in November, like winter, and then in the spring it comes up as soon as it knows it can survive, because it knows. I mean, I see these things coming up and I'm amazed every year that they survive, and then they just wait and they stay small, and all of a sudden, but they're putting down a bit of a root and following the freezing ground down, the frost in the ground. And then beginning of June, as soon as you start getting a few warm days, bang, they shoot right up and the males go right into flower. And these are even faster. These flower, some of them on the 3rd node. The ones Neville found flower on every single one, 100% flowered on the 5th or the 7th node. And so you could count on that. But with these, and also I think that lowrider, there's a story, they say lowrider come from some kind of Mexican Ruderalis. I think it came from Neville's gear. And somebody that just went and found faster ones, the ones that flower at the 3rd node. Within those lines, because there was never any Ruderalises found in autoflowering in Mexico before, and none since. So I mean, that's the only thing that makes sense. And now growing these Siberians, like I've grown them indoors and had them dropping pollen on 19 days, on day 19.
Wow.
Yeah. On the 3rd node, dropping pollen on 19 days. So that, that's they're amazing in that way.
They're tough, vigorous plants too. I saw that looking at that patch, the photos of your patch, like they grow kind of like, like creeping thyme. You can just walk on it.
Yeah, it's like spring. So animals can walk on them. That's not going to bother them. They've adapted to that. You can tell, and because they look like little springs the way they're coming up, and so that was part of the animal thing. You can tell, thinking of that then, but noticing it now, how they can take being walked on. They can, and that I think is what cracks the seeds along these trails, and that's how they spread, is along the trails of people moving, nomads and people, just the Silk Road, and in general, people just traveling west, east and west.
So you mentioned that Neville found different phenotypes there in Hungary when he found those plants. Yes. But you also mentioned that there are different varieties of
from different areas. It's all the same real thing, but there's slightly different types in the different areas. And one of the reasons, like I was saying about it, probably not, I don't think it having inbred with the hemp, is because I don't know if you've been through Iowa and Nebraska and all that area. Have you been through there? Yeah. I was through in the 80s. I don't know what it's like now, but in the 80s, right on the side of the road, there was hemp plants 15 feet high, and big, beautiful, just every morphology you can imagine, from short indigo looking ones to big, so you can see that was the old hemp varieties. These ones these Ruderalis, none of them grow that big. They all, right from Mongolia right to Hungary and Romania, and that they all grow maybe 4 or 5, some maybe 6 feet high, but most are 3 or 4 feet high, and wispy little bud. They never mold. Sometimes they never you see some bugs on them, but not too much. And pouring rain right on the buds week after week. They're really amazing in that way. And there's a certain smell to these Hungarians that Neville had. They had this grassy, concentrated smell that you had a hard time getting out breeding. But these the Eastern Russian ones and that have a more pleasant. They still have that in it, but they have more pleasant floral, citrus, hashy. Everything you've ever smelled in weed, you can smell in this autoflowering Ruderalis. It will remind you of any weed you've ever smelled.
And did you say that you thought that modern cannabis, Cannabis sativa and Cannabis indica are descendants of Ruderalis?
I think so. I think so. Like the way people try to think, they say it's in the Himalayas and so on and so on, but it's most likely like Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, that whole Central Asian, Western Mongolia. So I think it developed there, and then as it spread south, it's come out of autoflowering because it didn't have to anymore. And then I think people started selecting for longer fibers as well, which then you're getting into the more sativa looking, because they were using the fiber for it. And so that then you're getting out of the autoflower trade. I think it's all still in there deep. Like even now, if you look at the way the modern cushes that have been grown inside for 20, 30 years, the way they grow, most of them will flower now on 15, 16 hours. We've, and if you put them outside for sure by 14 and a half or 15 hours. And before you used to really have to wait till 12 and wait a couple of weeks for them to kick in. And, but we are already epigenetically changing, bringing out that, not changing it, bringing that out in these cushes and all that stuff. And some of them, you have a hard time keeping them out of flower now, even on 20 or 22 hours light. So I think all of that is deep inside. Even like I've grown ties, real ties, that all of a sudden in the middle of the summer, they'll start flowering, especially the males, but the odd females too. So if they're somewhere deep inside, that's, that's in Indonesia, they say it came from there. There's, I think that is where it originated.
And then so the idea is maybe people started cultivating them, and because of the change in climates and where they were bringing them to, they evolved into the sativa and indicas that we know.
That's what makes the most sense, because I can't ever see a big Thai sativa slowly creeping north and turning into an autoflower. You know what I mean? But I can see these autoflowers creeping south and slowly getting longer flower. And as people started using them more, like I say, when you select for longer flower, longer rope, then you're automatically selecting for the more sativa and the more, because you see all the types within it. Even within this Siberian, you got short little wider leafed ones with one bud. You got the bushy ones, little Christmas tree ones, and so you see all the types. Actually, you see quite a few differences between the males and females too, which to me, that's a deep theory that I have behind this. When it originally separated from hops or whatever it was, that I think there's another plant that came in there, and that the males and females somehow are a different species from way back. So that they used to pollinate themselves only, but there's some other third thing in there, I think. Anyway, that's just a theory from watching them grow for years and years and years, seeing how the males act so much different than the females compared to regular lines that we grow today, which, it's just a different thing, you can say.
What is the effect of the Ruderalis, that like the one that you're growing at your home?
Very little effect. It's just, you just feel better. That's all. You suddenly just feel a bit better.
Kind of effect.
No stone, like I've never had them tested. I know somebody that crossed these, like a lot of people are growing them, and people have crossed them to some of the modern lines, and it went straight to 14 or 15% CBD. So that has to be the dominant in there. And it's a very fine, there's something about it. You just feel like smoking a couple of joints every year, and then you're okay, when it's harvested kind of thing. And it's a very subtle homeopathic dose kind of a thing. It just takes the edge off. If it's pleasant. Yeah.
How does one go about breeding with autoflowers or with Ruderalis?
If you want to make autoflowers, the way to do it, the best thing to do is you want to keep your potency of your normal variety, of course. If you want to turn it into an autoflower, you take a male from one of these autoflowers, breed it into your female. Then you've brought the autoflower into the line. So, but at first it's mostly recessive. We used to think it was more dominant, but it's recessive. So the first ones you'll grow from that. You might get a few of that autoflower, depending on the variety. Sometimes you'll get almost none.
Sorry, the first that you grow from what?
The first F1s of your Ruderalis male to your regular line female. So the F1s of that, often you won't get very many of the autoflower, but they will flower almost all, or about half, a couple of weeks quicker. All of a sudden they're 2 or 3 weeks quicker outside in a different shape, and they start to take on the potency changes, of course, and you get more minor cannabinoids coming in. So first you have your F1s. Now, when you grow those, you pick the plants that are the most like the one you like, because they've all got this autoflower recessive in it now. So you then you take two, a nice female and a nice male of the types you like best that are the most like the female you're trying to turn auto. And you cross and you inbreed those. You see? So now you're onto an F2. So these F2s, all of a sudden you'll see about 25, 30% or so come out as autoflowers.
So the F2s are two autoflowers that
no, they're autoflower, but they're recessive still. Now you're not using the Ruderalis anymore. You're using just the F1s that you made. You see, so by inbreeding it one more time, you're bringing it to the surface. You're starting to bring it into dominance a bit. So you'll get about a quarter that are autoflower. Then you inbreed from those. Out of that quarter that are autoflower, pick the ones that are the least like the Ruderalis, but the most like the ones that you like, and inbreed those, and then you'll be right up to 75, 80% autoflower, and then you can pick a few more and inbreed them again and breed out the rest if you want. But it's really just 3 steps. Make an F1, inbreed those F1s, find your autoflowers in your F2s, in your F3s, and inbreed those, and then by F4 you've got it pretty much locked in. You know what I mean?
Yeah, very interesting.
Yeah. So Neville did this, and he talks to his Canadian customers. That was mainly me, and a lot of people in Canada at the time were ordering. The indoor growers were growing from him, and a lot of the outdoor growers were ordering from SSSC, Super Stevens Seed Club, at that time, because he had these M39s and these Frieslands and these kind of things that ended up being very popular here. So Neville wanted to make the autoflowers, especially eventually with hazes and everything. And after working them for a few years, he was just more interested in doing his own the hazes and all that kind of stuff. So he just didn't keep on with it, But I kept on with it, and then 10 years later or something, they started breeding it into hemp, and the Finola came from that, and a few other varieties. Now there's people trying to say that all the autoflowers now come from Finola. And the other one wasn't even an autoflower. Whether the stuff around now comes from Finola or not is irrelevant. One way or another, what he found was a real autoflower, and he was the first to use it breeding into regular varieties. As simple as that. And there's a picture in 89 and 90 catalog of the Ruderalis skunk, and that was one that I sent that I was growing outdoors here at 49 degrees latitude. I grew them in 40-gallon drums out in the bush. I had autoflowers 15 feet high. Some of these skunk haze autoflowers that never even got in the catalog. These things were 2 pounds, 15 feet high. And because we didn't realize what CBD really was at that time, in 87, 88, the buzzes were all strange. All of a sudden you'd get one that was just knock you out, classic good buzz, all done beginning of September, end of August. And then the next one, I had a couple of local ne'er-do-wells, that I used to experiment on, Couldn't happen to a nicer pair, I'm telling you. Anyway, so these guys that we would drive around, I'd say, well, try this one and try that one, and I would study them and see how they were, So one time we were smoking some of these Hayes Shady Lady Ruderalis, I think it was, these, and we were driving along and smoking a good joint. They were fucking laughing and this, that. And then I had this other one I had just harvested, and I knew there was something weird about this one. It had a very strange profile, nice but strange, So I light up this big joint and pass it, and we're driving through the storm, and all of a sudden I'm not hearing much anymore coming from the back seat. I'm trying to watch because it's snowing. Fucking both guys are asleep in the back seat, both their head back, from smoking this last joint. So it was funny to see, we didn't know. We just thought it was different potencies, no idea that it was CBD and that these other cannabinoids, how important they were with the ratios and so on. So it would have took quite a bit more real selecting towards, but that was the only way we selected, is how it felt. Right?
But the autoflowers change the effect of the plants, or the Ruderalis changes the effect of the plants that it's bred with
because of the CBD and all that kind of stuff, But once you breed towards that certain what you like, you can breed most of it out. A little bit stays in there, and you can really. It's going to get to a point where you won't be able to tell anymore, because there are already hash plants and that flower at 18 hours and 17 hours that you can't really call Ruderalis, but they are autoflowering towards light, So what do you call that? it's just regular photoperiod, but it flowers anywhere on Earth as soon as it hit 18 hours light, which is nearly everywhere on Earth, except when you get into the extreme Arctic or Antarctic, you know.
Yeah. So interesting. Huh? But I have a few more minutes left, Dwight, and I wanted to ask if you would, if you have any advice for people who are growing autoflowers. How much?
Don't feed them too much. They don't need much soil. They just get a little root, about 2 or 3 or 4 inches long. It looks like a little ginseng root, and I think there's something very important about those roots too. And just let them do. There's just something about the taste of them. Like I've made tea with them in that, and there's something in that as well too. Like there is in all cannabis roots, of course, but in the Ruderalis, I think there is as well, for sure. If you want to grow it, just find a nice little patch where the ground's okay and not too matted with already indigenous grass or whatever is there, you know, and dig it up a bit, throw a few seeds in the fall, preferably, or very early in the spring, and just let them go. That's all. Try to let them go with nature as much as possible. If it happens to be a very dry spot, you might have to water them if it's not naturally a bit of moisture there, but usually you don't. And, you know, they'll catch on, then you just let them go. That's it. The next year they'll pollinate, and the year after that you'll have a nice patch coming up forever and ever. And they brighten up the yard. They draw in all kinds of predator bugs, predator wasps, and you know, different. They're very, very interesting. You know, as soon as you look at them, you feel better. I know I do anyway. So as soon as I go and I see that bright in the sun, you're instantly, that's nice. You know.
I remember you writing about the how they pollinate, and sometimes how they'll neck themselves. They'll
do that. Well, and this is especially on the dry years. All of a sudden, it's getting dry in the year. You can tell they know that the females are pollinated enough. That's it. So all of a sudden, all the males will suddenly they'll bend over like that in a matter of days, and I don't, not all as in 100%, but like 80 to 90% will suddenly, you'll go out there and it's bent over. And at first I was thinking it must have been the wind, or because they weren't finished, like, you know, but when you take it and you try to straighten it back up, you can tell it's been forced into that position by the plant. You know, it's staying there, you know, and they do very strange things like that. And as the seeds are getting ready, a lot of the calyxes, the seeds fall off the plants with the calyx still attached. And the calyx has a little point on it like that, and it's just like a little Velcro tip. And these things attach themselves to everything. I've seen them attached to wild feral cats that live out here. I see cats walking by with 2 or 3 seeds hanging off their tail, and I've got them all of a sudden. I get them on my clothes. So I realize that this is the way that they spread themselves, and it's a very thin calyx, so it also dries up fast. So because I've just left them as well, just leave them where they are, and to see what happens to them on the floor or and within 2 hours, always within a couple of hours, suddenly the seed is out of the calyx. You know, so it's just enough to carry it a little distance and a little distance, and you know, and they fall off green too, so you can't really see them. And then they just drop out of the calyx. Then the calyx just looks like a little piece of leaf on your clothes or something, and the seed's gone. And then, of course, then I've found them. I found plants. All of a sudden, I'll see one plant coming up 100 yards away, and another one coming up, you know, in a totally where I wouldn't expect it, you know. So they do these things. And another strange thing about them was I had never seen intersex on them. And I'd never seen intersex on the ones before either, which we found strange, but a good trait. And I'd never seen intersex on the lowriders either. And so for this, I grew these for 5 years, and I hadn't seen intersex in about 6 years. About 2 years ago, we had a very, very hot, dry summer. And they're in a place where they just didn't have no water at all, and they were half the size as normal. I thought this was maybe going to finish off the crop. This was trying to, you know, that they weren't going to survive. So and all of a sudden, they all hermed. All the females hermed, and they turned into like a totally different looking plant. If you're looking at it, if you didn't look at the leaves, you wouldn't know that those flowers were from a cannabis plant. So they all hermed, they pollinated themselves early. The seeds were half the size, just like this big, and they dropped their seeds. Everything was okay. The next year, which was this year, then last summer, they all came up like normal. Not a single herm. Yeah. Yeah, so they you know, they adapt, they do what they have to do. They, you know, and I would have thought that was it. It ruined the crop. They're all going to be herms now. They're not going to be able to survive. And they came up stronger than ever this year. So it was, and not a single herm that I could find. So
wow, they're almost like viral. They're just
they are, and they're thinking. It's like they're thinking. You know, they're adapting and thinking at all times. They know what they can take. You can tell that they know what to do. And you don't have to intervene, and you don't have to, and they'll do what they have to do to survive. Of course, here where I am, there's a lot of spruce trees around, so it'll never really spread from here. It couldn't, I'd have to go a little further south or west in Canada to put it in a place where it would spread, you know. But here, I just like, I enjoy looking at it and studying it.
Yeah. And any advice for growing autoflowers? I've only grown autoflowers a few times in my life, but I grew them just like a normal photo period, 12 hours and 12 off.
Oh, then you're not really getting the best. You know, you really want to do it on 18. What 18. I find best is with them is they have they're fast. So you don't want to up pot them. You're good to put the germinated seed right in its final pot right away. And then not too rich of a soil, but enough of it that it can go through, you know, at least 6 inches deep. Or no, for the autoflowers, even up to a little more for the real autoflowers. And just not too much, not too rich, not to disturb them in any way. They don't like being trimmed. They don't like being topped. They don't like none of that stuff, you know, and that's it. Just let them do their thing right from beginning in the same pot from day one, and they'll be the happiest. I like growing them. The thing is, I think that light hours are, of course, part of the terroir, and you bring out certain things with certain light hours. So when I grow autoflowers indoors now, I grow them on 18 hours, get them good into flower, and then by about halfway through 4 or 5 weeks, I'll put them down to 14 or 15 hours, and then sometimes even finish them on 12, like a normal plant, to bring out that side of it, so to speak. Whether it really does on paper or not, I'm just, you know, it's through just looking at it, but that's how I'm thinking about it, because as far as cannabis goes, there is no other plants on earth that grow naturally at 18 hours light, except these Ruderalis in the far north, 52, 54 degrees latitude. So by keeping these cushes and these things on 18, 20 hours light year after year after year, we're bringing something out in them, some ancient, you know, which I think is one of the reasons why we're losing a lot of these brighter profiles and the nicer, smoother buzzes. And I think that's part of it. We're bringing out the worst possible side in it just by trying to keep it alive. Yeah.
Huh. Yeah. Oh, interesting. Well, Dwight, that's our time for today. Dwight Diotte is a cannabis geneticist and researcher.
Genetics advisor
and researcher. Thank you, Dwight. It's been great talking to you. I'm Michelle Nevado, and this is the Friday 420. Until next time.
Thank you for having me, Michelle.
Thanks, everyone.